Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Midweek Takeaway. Today we're joined by Professor Richard Conroy of Conroy Gold and Natural Resources. Welcome back, Richard. How's things?
Things are very good indeed. We're delighted to see the actual joint venture be transformed now from an agreement onto actual work on the ground. It's a very nice feeling.
I saw that obviously there's the announcement today where you gave an update on the step-out drilling program at Clontarf Gold Deposit. 2 holes out of the 8 in the current program drilled, and obviously mineralization intersected in both drill holes. Do you want to give us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, this is the very initial commencement of what will be a very major drilling program. And this is simply the first 8 holes that we started on. But at the same time, it's still very important to actually start doing the drilling as a joint venture together. And it's worked very well with the first 2 holes, as you say, announced. Another 2 holes are underway. Then there'll be a further 4 holes after that to complete this very initial program, which obviously has its geological, its technical aspects, but most of all, it gets things started. And it'll be followed up by much more extensive programs. Remember, in the first phase alone, at Clontarf, the Deemer people, they'll be contributing €4.5 million. But €4.5 million means an awful lot of drilling. That's just simply for the first phase at Clontarf. And over and beyond that, of course, they're contributing to the work commitments on all the other licenses. So when we say €4.5 million, we're talking about a minimum figure, and that's simply for the first phase. When you move into the next phase, there's another minimum of €4.5 million, but of course, much more beyond that once you start thinking about actually getting your mining permit, your planning permission, considering construction and all the rest of it. So it's pretty major stuff. And of course, as you know, we're looking at in the Danish Clontarf area alone, we're looking at figures there in the region of 9 to 10 million ounces. That's pretty substantial by world standards. And yet it only represents one part of the overall area in which the joint venture will now be exploring and developing. So it's I don't think people have really perhaps taken on board yet as to the magnitude, the potential, the return that's going to occur from this joint venture. Obviously,
you saw that the drill hole 1 demonstrated mineralization in an area where there was no surface gold in soil geochemical signature. Obviously, the drill core's pending, but just how significant is that you found this?
It's enormously significant in itself. As you may remember, the way in which we've demonstrated this 40-mile gold trend is primarily by geochemical sampling. The guys have taken over 20,000 samples. Those samples are analyzed, and we know from actual experience of drilling that if a sample is 10 parts per billion or above in golden soil, then you hit bedrock. But what's becoming increasingly evident, and indeed is shown in this hole that you've just referred to, is that although that gold in soil area at Clontarf, Clay Lake, Glenish, Sleevelaw, all the other places, is very extensive. In actual fact, over and beyond that, the gold is to be found. So that really begins to put pretty significant potential multiples on the very large ounces of gold numbers that we're already looking at. So it's tremendously exciting and very, very significant.
When we visited Clontarf and we stood at the farmhouse that Conroy owns,
yes,
and we looked over to our left-hand side, that was where the drilling was taking place. That has been hole number 1, I take it.
Yes.
So that was being drilled while we were there, I think.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And then hole number 2 was across the valley, was it?
Strictly speaking, hole number 2 is the one down on the land which we already own, which is central to the ore body, and hole number 1 is just across the valley from there with a little stream running through it. But both of them indicate the very considerable size of the ore bodies. You can have a pretty large gold deposit in a relatively small size, but when you start multiplying that up over a very considerable area, the figures really become quite high, and we're still only talking of down to a couple of 100 meters. So we're in a tremendously exciting situation here with figures that could be very large indeed. But our first and primary objective is to start bringing in gold mines on the property, one of them at Clontibret and the other probably at Clay Lake. So there's a tremendous amount of work. It's nice, marvelous to see the actual drilling, the work of the ground started. But my goodness, there's going to be an awful lot more.
And 2 rigs as well, which is...
2 rigs, indeed, absolutely. And that number is going to be multiplied up. I wouldn't be surprised if we'd be seeing 3 or 4 rigs in the not too distant future, and perhaps even more. It really is a tremendous project and tremendous potential aboard you. It certainly isn't reflected in our share price. Our share price is quite ridiculous, but there we are. Again, one sees history repeating itself. When we made our Galmoy discoveries, which were indeed very significant discoveries and transformed Ireland into an international zinc province, those discoveries were announced in public, as we've announced the discoveries here in the Longford Down Massif and at Clontibret, announced in public, and our share price hung around in the low 20s, more or less where it is in this company at the moment. And then it gradually, as people began to take it on board, and the more percipient people, one saw them buying in shares up to the 100, up to the 200, and then people really began to get on board. But and they still made a lot of money because the price went on up to over £7, and a lot of people did very well out of it. And I hope they'll do equally well. You can't guarantee share prices; they go up and they go down, of course. But nonetheless, the potential here is far greater than it ever was at Galmoy. So it's a very exciting situation, and it's going to be reflected in due course in the company itself, because, as I've just mentioned, we're already looking at probably 2 gold mines coming in, and as you know from the joint venture, we can either retain 42.5% of each, or we can have a carry the whole way through. So quite significant sums of money will be coming into the company by any standards. But it's not on board yet. I think actually out at PDAC, we were there recently, and a number of people, including some from the very large gold companies, were indeed came to talk with us and congratulated us on the deal and seeing it going ahead, and obviously are beginning to take on board that as well as Ireland being a significant zinc province, it could also be quite a significant source of gold.
The issue with the depth, when do you perceive that the first hole to depth will go? Because these holes went to about 250 meters, but we could be looking at 300, 400, 500 meters, and it still carries on.
1,000 meters, you could be looking at 2,000 meters. We have no idea how deep it goes. And of course, one has the example from Fosterville out in Australia, where for many years they had very comfortable, relatively shallow gold production. Then one day they got around to going a bit deeper and realized that they'd pretty well got a bonanza underneath that, of much higher grade and so on. There's no way we can guarantee that. But so far as we've drilled each time, we've always intersected gold, and we've no reason to believe that it doesn't go down much, much deeper indeed, and could even be at a higher grade as you go more deeply.
Yeah, so, I mean, geologically, the potential in these systems is that the lower, or so the deeper they go, the higher the grades can become. It doesn't necessarily mean this is going to be the case, but geologically in other parts of the world, when these type of systems have been discovered, the deeper you go, the higher the grades. So that's why I'm asking the question, when do you...
I'd love to put in a couple of deep holes straight away, but our first primary objective is to bring in the first gold mine, and one has to go along with that. But we might just, if we get a spare rig sometime, shove it down a little bit deeper.
Okay. I look forward to that information, because this would blow the whole thing apart, obviously, if it goes down a lot deeper. And would be having a South African style mine, maybe 2,000 meters down. And
it could be quite big.
I mean, everything's on course. There's nothing negative to report here. When do we think the assays are coming back? I know that there is issues with assays all over the world, but when do we think we will get assays?
Well, we've asked for them as soon as we possibly can, and I must say they are very obliging. But you're quite right. There is an enormous back pressure on assays. And unfortunately, it's one of the things of COVID that has really disrupted the laboratories. Sometimes people are out, then they're back in, and then suddenly people are out again. And when you're trying to run a structured laboratory for analysis, this really throws things. But as soon as we get the results, we're looking forward to them very much. And as soon as we get them, we'll be bringing them out. But in the meantime, obviously, the drilling is going on and more core will be going in to be analysed.
I think wrapping up, I don't think you could wish for a better chairman's statement than the RNS was signed off, which appears that the mineralisation is extensive across the area, remains open in all directions, including at depth. So I think really that says it all, that everything is going to plan and it's performing well.
Absolutely. I know it's a marvelous situation to be in. But mind you, took us a long time to get here. And many people probably thought, we'll never get there, but we have now.
We look forward to any future updates and talking to you again, Richard. It's always a pleasure. Richard Conroy, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks. Good to talk with you as well. Many thanks.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net